Welcome everyone to the October 26th Board of Adjustment meeting, and I'll call this meeting to order. I believe I'm correct in saying that there are no minutes currently for approval, so we'll move on to sounding the agenda and ask for any postponements or withdrawals at this time. Yes, sir.
I'm Jim Hodge. I don't represent an applicant. On page 2, item number 3, V 2007-92, Wilms and Associates Architects. I think those folks just walked in. I represent Catherine Clay and John R. Neal and maybe some other folks. And it appears, based on information that's been just provided to us, there may be an issue about the efficacy of the fence altogether, not just its height. And apparently the Ashland Park Neighborhood Association is interested in getting involved in this issue. And as a consequence, we think it would be not an efficient use of your time to deal with the height of something that possibly can't be done at all, and to give everyone a chance to talk about it and look at it and see if it can be resolved, we would request that you postpone that until your next meeting. And I have not, as I have only been recently asked to come down here, I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. and Ms. KZ or Mr. Wilms about this, but hopefully they would concur in the request for postponement.
Would it be possible for you to get with the applicant and discuss this real quick while we move on through the rest of the agenda? I believe I did see Mr. Wilms just walk in.
We'd certainly be amenable to that.
If you would, we'll go on through the agenda and see what the two of y'all come up with at that time. Any other postponements or withdrawals?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Dick Murphy. On page 3 of your agenda, Conditional Use Appeals number 2, C 2028, James G. Wilhite. We're continuing to work on that and would request a 1-month postponement on that.
Okay, that'd be for C 2000-28, the revocation hearing. Are there anyone else in the audience who was here to speak on this today? If not, do we have a motion? There is a motion made for postponement. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Lena Wiseman. The first item on your agenda, V 2007-78, Dropping Bird LLC. About a week ago, we sent a letter to the staff withdrawing this request because of notice. It's still on the agenda. We have subsequently submitted a landscaping plan to building inspection that does not require a variance. So therefore, we are withdrawing this request. Okay. I don't know if you need to.
Thank you. Don't need a motion. Okay. No motions needed there. Thank you, Mrs. Wiseman. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Thomas Payne. I'm the chairman of Lexington Montessori School, case number 2007-88 on page 5. Due to both the heavy lifting involved and a schedule we have on a schedule conflict that I have on November 30th, I would like to ask for postponement until your December 14th hearing.
Okay, thank you. Were there anyone else here today that wanted to speak in regards to this? If not, I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Thank you very much.
And I will clarify that was until the December 12th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, that was December 14th.
14th, I'm sorry. Thank you. Are there any other withdrawals or postponements?
Mr. Chairman, we have a letter from Castleton Lions.
Yes.
That's on page 6 of the agenda. Item number 1, AV 2007-84. They have withdrawn that request.
Okay, thank you. Any other withdrawals or postponements? If not, we will go through and sound the rest of the agenda for no discussion items or those that may have objectors. The first case would be V 2007-86, Mr. Richard Peterson and Sherman Carter Barnhart, who's appealing for a variance. I believe there has been some changes on that, Mr. Marks.
Yeah, we have a revised staff report I need to hand out at this time.
Okay. What's the staff's recommendation on that now? Approval? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So V 2007-86 is recommended by the staff for approval. Are there anyone present or any objectors that would like to speak in regards to this? Okay, thank you. I believe the Williams and Associates are probably still discussing. We'll move on to the next one, V 2007-93, Nicole Development Company, who appeals for a variance at 173 Old Park Avenue. Are the applicants here? Yes. Any objectors to this? No? Okay, thank you. CV 2007-80 is recommended for disapproval, so we'll wait on that. CV 2007-60 Lexington Legends Boxing Club is recommended for approval. Is the applicant here today? Yes, okay. Thank you. Anyone here to object to that? No? Thank you. Next would be C 2007-87 MC Development and Construction Services, who's appealing for a conditional use for a drive-through. Applicants here? Yes. Any objectors? No? Okay. Thank you. Next would be C 2007-89 Life Community Church, appealing for conditional use permit for 162 Todd's Road. Is the applicant here? Yes. Thank you. Any objectors to this? No? Thank you. Next would be C 2007-90 Holston Gases Incorporated, who appeals for conditional use permit at 357 Blue Sky Parkway. Is the applicant here? Yes. Thank you. Any objectors to this? No? Okay. And then the last one is the Greer Land Company, A 2007-91, which is scheduled for disapproval, which we'll hear later. So before we get started, I would ask that anyone who plans to speak today here to stand and be sworn in. Raise your right hand. Do you swear the information you are about to give? Do you swear the information you are about to give shall be the truth? Please say I do. Yes. Thank you. So at this point, we'll move to the first case, which was V 2007-86, Mr. Richard Peterson and Sherman Carter Barnhart, who appeals for a variance at 475 West 2nd Street. Ms. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I represent the property owner, which is the Hannah Goodman Trust. We have worked with the staff, provided some additional information. We have reviewed the revised staff report that you all have just been given and the 3 conditions, and we would agree with that recommendation and ask for your approval.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Does staff have anything that needs to be addressed now with the changes? No?
I'm just trying to make it through this finding,
Okay.
this new finding.
Sure.
Jim, I have a question, please. Recommendation 3, in view of the new information, is no longer needed, is it?
Are you talking about condition number 3?
Yes.
I think it's important to leave that in there just to ensure that they do things in accordance with what the Board of Architectural Review approved.
All right. Thank you.
We have no problem leaving that in.
Thank you.
I'm okay. Okay.
If there are no questions, I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that V-2007-86, Richard Peterson / Sherman Carter Barnhart appeals for a variance to increase the allowable height of a wall from 6 feet to 8 feet 8 inches in a high-density apartment historic district overlay R4/81 zone on property located at 475 West 2nd Street. Council District 1 be approved as recommended by the staff and subject to the 3 conditions.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded for approval. If there are no further questions, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
At this point, we'll move on to V-2007-93, Nicole Development Company, LLC, who appeals for a variance to reduce the required rear yard from 34 feet to 10 feet at 173 Oak Park Avenue. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Dick Murphy, and I represent the owner, Nickel Development Company, and Van Meter Pettit is with me today, the architect, and we have reviewed the staff report and do agree with the findings and conditions of approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
Well, I'm a little bit disappointed that the backyard was reduced with that detached garage in what seems like a plan to connect from the beginning, eliminating a chance for any large trees back there.
Well, let me give you a little background on
Please,
that.
thank you.
If you would, put this up here. We had the original plan that was filed with the Board of Architecture Review was to have what I would call a horizontal garage through there. But I think, and I wasn't at the Board of Architecture Review. Amelia Armstrong is here from the BOAR, or the Division of Historic Preservation, if you want it. As I understand, the BOAR felt that there should be greater side yard setbacks, and so thus the garage was rotated to the configuration where we have it now, which is, well, the way you have it in your development plan, which we're going to put up. It was rotated 90 degrees that way. And we were agreeable to that. We did let them know we would like to have the covered walkway from the garage to the residence. We understood all along it had to come to you, and if you don't approve it, there won't be a covered walkway. And we weren't assuming it would be approved by you all. We wanted to request that. We thought it would be a benefit to the owners, but if it's not approved, we understand that, and we're not coming here like we've already built it, we've got to have it. We are requesting your approval, but this configuration was approved by the Board of Architecture Review after all the neighbors were notified. As you know, there's neighborhood notification for the BOAR as well as you all, and that was approved. Let me give you an aerial, too, which may help us on this. This is from Google Earth, and I mentioned that because that's why those longitude lines are on there. I couldn't get them out of there. But hopefully our color will come back a little bit more. Here's Old Park Avenue, and here is Woodland Park right here. Here is our property located right here. And as you can see, we're going back to here. I'm sorry, our property line goes back to here. As you can see, the property next to us is almost entirely paved on that, and we have kept open space here for the courtyards and the space in back. Now, I don't know, to be honest about it, if there were major trees on here before. I don't think the aerial indicates a lot of major trees on here, but I understand that concern, but we did get everything approved by the Board of Architectural Review before we started on this, and do think it's a very attractive addition to this neighborhood.
Why did you wait until the buildings were built before you came for this variance? Why not just get it at the same time that you were having the rest of the permit work done?
Well, perhaps that should have been done, but we understood if you all didn't approve it, we wouldn't do it. I mean, so regardless of whether we started at the beginning or now, I don't think the situation would have been a great deal different. They broke ground. This issue came up that technically it is considered apparently one building when it's covered. I'm not sure the contractor was aware of that when it first started, when all this discussion came up, but we understand it is. And so at that point, we were 6 weeks away from a Board of Adjustment hearing at that point, and they felt they needed to go ahead and start. And they, as I said, they fully understand. I mean, we're not taking this board's approval for granted by any means, but they fully understood that we would have to come back through you. I think the Board of Architectural Review understood that as well. They've approved it with the cover, but if you don't approve it, they've approved it without the covered walkway.
Mr. Murphy, do you think there's a precedence being set when you end up with a building of this size and no backyard, where you started with an empty lot?
No, I don't think so, because as I said, this is approved, as it was built on the ground right now, is totally in conformance with every regulation, because we have a detached garage, we have the house covered. The downtown master plan calls for increasing residential density on vacant lots. Our comprehensive plan calls for infill. This is in the R3 zone, which would allow 4 or 5 units on here. They're doing 2 units. So I guess I don't think it sets a precedent, because it doesn't have to come to you to be built the way it is. All we're asking, because there's sort of quirk in the building code, that it constitutes one building with a cover, that we would like to have the cover. It would be nice to have the cover here. It can be done without the cover on there as purely a detached garage on there. And as you can see from the aerial, a lot of the buildings around there are built, don't have any backyard at all. We have quite a bit more green space than a number of the houses in the area.
Are you talking about the 10 feet that's behind the garage?
10 feet and the courtyard between the garage and the back of the houses.
Right. Well, I sometimes get a little argumentative, and I won't do that here, but it doesn't seem to me like a quirk in the zoning laws, and it does seem like allowing this would be a stamp of approval on anybody that wants to build a large building and connect it later. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. Mr. Murphy, is this drawing, in a sense, to scale? In other words, is the garage reflect the size that it is compared to the size of the house, the length of the house?
Yes, it is, although there is an overhang. That the mass of the garage includes an overhang. Van, maybe you can tell me how much the overhang is on the garage, which is sort of a little deceptive on that. It's a little bigger on paper than it is on the ground.
Okay, because that's, I couldn't, like...
Yes, Van Meter Pettit, I'm the architect for the project, and the garage actually has about a 4-foot overhang on the front of it. Because it is a duplex and it has 2 units, there are 4 covered garage spaces, and one of the two units needs to use a covered walkway over the front of the garage to get back to their unit, which is the one lowest on the page, south on the drawing as you see it. The other one can go straight through the garage, covered into their unit. I've been doing housing for aging people with ramps and covered walkways for a couple of years now, and it's going to become there's going to be pressure, to make accommodations for aging clients, and that's really that's where this is coming from, is ramping and covering walkways so that you don't have rain and ice affecting people trying to get from their cars into their houses.
Yes. Might point out too, on the driveway area, we're using grass pavers on that, and it's a overall very interesting design on this house. We think it's important for, as Van mentioned, elderly or people who have mobility problems.
Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to recommend V 2007-93 Nickel Development Company, LLC, appeals for a variance to reduce the required rear yard from 34 feet to 10 feet in order to attach a garage to a residence by way of a covered walkway in a planned neighborhood residential/historic district overlay R3/H1 zone on property located at 173 Old Park Avenue, Council District 3, be approved as by staff recommendation with the 4 conditions that they set forth.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded for approval of V 2007-93. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Now that Mr. Hodge and the applicant of 1620 Richmond Road is back, did y'all come to any sort of?
We did not come to any agreement. We would still request postponement. There's another individual here now who said she didn't get notice. And through no fault of anyone, of course, under our existing regulations, only, I think, 14 people were notified of this, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's just the way it's written. But my understanding is the neighborhood association itself is concerned about this and would like to be involved, and there are other individuals who didn't get notice who would like to be involved. So we would still request that you postpone until next month. Now, I think Mr. Wilms and his clients disagree and probably won't be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Real quick, Mr. Hodge, did you say you were representing the neighborhood association or not?
I'm not at the present time representing the neighborhood association. It's been represented to me that the neighborhood association is interested in becoming involved in this, but at the present time I only represent Ms. Clay and Mr. Neal.
Okay, thank you. For the moment, the applicant, whoever's the spokesperson, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Tom Wilms, Wilms & Associates Architects at 535 West Jefferson Street. This variance that we're asking for, I think you know what it's for. It's for the 2 gates that are on this fence that we have been under construction with, that we had permitted through the city and received a permit to construct it, and the fence itself complies with the current building code of 6 feet, and we have roughly 400 feet of fence, and we are asking for a variance for the 2 gates, and I think you can see that in there. The fact that we had anybody objecting to this, we have tried to make prior to this to go to the neighbors and adjoining neighbors, and obviously everybody has seen this under construction, so we're anxious to finish the project because we are under construction. Whether this is a place or not, the issue that we heard today for the first time, right when we walked in this meeting, initially, at least, was not asking whether or not the variance of the fence for the gates was not the initial issue, as I understand it, but the issue is whether or not the fence is legal under a covenant for the neighborhood. And I think that's, we have not been approached by anybody until this time. We see this as two total issues. It does not affect, would not affect this committee's approval of this variance or carry forth of this variance, because the fence is already under construction. We already have, not the gates, but we already have the fence being made, which is permittable according to the city codes. And there's no additional risk to my clients at this point if we carry this variance forward. And if, in fact, which is another legal issue that's outside of this committee, they determine that through the covenants that we cannot build the fence, then that's an issue that would negate the variance one way or the other. We just can't build any of it. And what we're proposing is that's another issue that is not going to be dealt with here. We'd like to move forward with the variance request, because if they decide next week that this is a moot case, then we've lost a month of construction time. And I don't see where there's any risk for the committee making this variance request based on the staff's recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. That's pretty much what I was asking for. At this time, knowing that there are objectors, this case apparently will be heard later, and we'll get into it unless the legal Ms. Rochelle Bowen has anything to add at this point. No. So at this point, with objectors, we will finish the agenda in order and take that up a little bit later. The next case, I do believe, would be the Legends Boxing Club, C 2007-60, whose appeals for a conditional use permit to occupy an existing building as an indoor recreational facility at 1195 Versailles Road, Building A. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I'm William Sarge Ferris, founder and the coach of the Legends Boxing Club, 1195 Versailles Road.
You have 6 conditions. Do you understand the conditions?
Yes, sir.
You agree to the conditions?
Yes, sir.
Staff, Mr. Marks, at one point in time we had difficulty with parking, I believe. I presume that has been resolved.
Yeah, it's certainly not ideal, but I think the critical thing in this case is the special events that will draw the higher demand for parking are just going to be once a month. So we thought that was manageable and have worked out something that traffic engineering's looked at, and so it's acceptable to them, put it that way. It's certainly less than ideal, but we think it'll work.
Okay, so it is acceptable to traffic engineering?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? If not, I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that C 2007-60, Legends Boxing Club, appeals for a conditional use permit to occupy an existing building as an indoor recreation facility in a wholesale and warehouse business B4 zone on property located at 1195 Versailles Road, Building A, Council District 11, be approved with the following conditions that put forth by the staff.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
I want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all the chair members, board members, and special thanks for all the Jims, Jim Hughes, Jim Galloway, Jim Marks, for their untiring support and efforts to help make this approval possible. Thank you, and I represent all the youth in the city of Lexington. Thank you.
Thank you for working and being diligent with the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good luck.
The next case would be C 2007-87, MC Development and Construction Services, who appeals for a conditional use permit to construct a drive-through facility for a proposed bank in a P1 zone on property located at 535 Wellington Way. Yes, sir, your name?
Lyndon Platt with Eagle Engineering, representing Snyder Designs and MC Development. We're in agreement with the conditions that have been listed and request approved.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions from the board? If not, I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that C-2007-87, MC Development and Construction Services appeals for conditional use permit to construct a drive-through facility on proposed bank and professional office P1 zone on property located at 535 Wellington Way, Council District 9, be approved as recommended by the staff and subject to the conditions set forth.
Second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded for approval of C 2007-87. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If perchance in the future this ceases to be a drive-through for a bank and decide to sell toys or something, does the motion that we've just approved today change, or is it affected anyway if the purpose of this specifically for the bank is not carried out or ceases to be in it?
I think that the conditional use is just for a drive-through facility for goods or services. So without a condition restricting this drive-through to be used at a bank or financial institution, it would remain regardless of what permitted use went in there, as long as it's a principal permitted use. Obviously, if the use went in there that was a conditional use that had to come before the board, then the board would have the ability to look at the entire picture, including the drive-through. But in the absence of a condition, any permitted use could continue to use that drive-in facility.
Thank you.
You know, it has a development plan associated with that Planning Commission has approved.
Thank you, sir. Motion did pass. Thank you.
Some of them do.
The next case would be C 2007-89, Life Community Church, who appeals for a conditional use permit to establish a church in a portion of an existing building at a B3 zone on property located at 162 Todd's Road, Suite 220 and 260. Yes, sir, your name, please?
My name is Doug Boyd, and I'm here representing Life Community Church.
Have you read the conditions and agreed to them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? C 2007 Life Community Church.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to recommend that C 2007-89, Life Community Church appeals for a conditional use permit to establish a church in a portion of an existing building in a highway service building B3 zone on property located at 162 Todd's Road, Suites 220 and 260 in Council District 7, be approved as recommended by the staff with the two conditions that stand.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I think the motion has been made and seconded for the approval of C 2007-89, the Life Community Church. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. The next case would be C 2007-90, Holston Gases Incorporated, who appeals for a conditional use permit to allow an above-ground storage for flammable gas located in an I-1 zone at property located at 357 Blue Sky Parkway. Yes, sir. Your name, sir?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Roger Leidenberger for Holston Gases. We have read the recommendation of the staff, and we're in agreement with the conditions.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions from the board in regards to this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to make a motion. C 2007-90, Holston Gases, appeals for a conditional use permit to allow above-ground storage flammable gas in light industrial zone on property located at 357 Blue Sky Parkway, Council District 12, be approved with the staff's recommended conditions.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made and seconded for approval of C 2007-90, Holston Gases Incorporated. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I think we have worked our way through the agenda, at least for the initial time. And taking into consideration that it appears that we have a few objectors in regards to the Richard Peterson, Sherman Carter, Barnhart's V 2007-86, I will try and disperse with the rest of the agenda first, which will take us back to CV 2007-80, Mr. James Lamont Hudson, who appeals for a conditional use permit to allow dancing and live entertainment in a B1 zone located 1765 Alexander Drive, and I believe this is a continuation from last month. Yes, Mr. Hudson.
Hello, Chairman, members of the board. James Hudson.
Mr. Hudson, I believe there was some concern simply because of what you were asking for, entertainment, live entertainment in conjunction with the neighborhood close by. Has there been any changes in regards to this?
As far as what we're asking for, we're basically just canceling out the live entertainment and live bands and et cetera and stuff like that, and we're just asking for a dance permit.
A dance?
We have diagrams of maybe how we could restructure the facility and stuff like that so that noise wouldn't be a nuisance to the neighborhood or anything.
Okay. Would you be able to hand that to the staff and let them put it up on the screen, please?
This is basically how the facility looks right now. The banquet area is in the back where the dancing will be held at in the open area. That's just one of the proposals, something different, pushing the banquet area more towards the front so that the noise wouldn't travel through any other walls or anything like that, and that will put the dining area towards the back. Diagram 3 shows that the banquet area is over in the left-hand side of the building, and we just kind of reorganize the dining areas. So that'll keep the banquet area up front and basically keep the noise to a minimum towards the back of the facility.
This ain't no way this can go.
And this last proposal here is basically just taking out the storage area that was initially storage area that was initially here. We've taken, on this diagram, we've taken these walls out here, straight across here, and we've added the storage area in the back here and put a soundproof wall here that will keep any noise away from the residential area.
Thank you. With the opposition that was here last month, have you had a chance to visit with the neighborhoods, visit with those concerned?
We haven't actually been able to visit them. We have contacted a couple of the neighborhood association board members and try to get some suggestions on what we could do to possibly accommodate the noise or soundproofing the area, and there was really no suggestions. They was just, basically saying no, just totally against it.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Mr. Hudson, just so I get this clarified, are you saying that you want a dance floor but no live entertainment?
Well, just a dance floor just for dancing, no live bands or instruments or anything like that. Maybe comic acts or maybe...
You talking about a DJ or something like that?
Yes, sir. Just something small, something simple like that. No instruments being played or anything like that, or concerts or anything like that.
Any other questions? Do we have opposition here for this? Yes. Well, thank you. We'll hear from them at this time. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Mrs. Hudson. One question real quick. No, take all the time you need, but.
Do I understand you correctly that there would be dancing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What method are you going to use to provide the music for that dancing? Not clear what you said.
Speakers, just regular speakers, maybe a DJ. Maybe they have new machines now. You could just hook up an iPod to it and let it play. And music has to come through speakers. We all know that. But
there are speakers in the facility.
There are speakers in the facility now, which we
as a restaurant.
We will be using, but we will add just a few more speakers into the banquet area where music can be heard, at a reasonable volume. Excuse me.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you. I'm Joe Childers, attorney for the West Gardenside Neighborhood Association. Mr. Childers, were you here at the beginning when everyone was sworn in? I was not. Okay. If you would, please, do you swear that the information you're about to give shall be the truth? I do. Thank you. We're somewhat surprised by the change. The application, as we understand it, was for a live music, including live bands and dancing. The comments that I've prepared, I think, would be equally applicable to a DJ system, which would provide loud music and dancing and probably the same level of patronage at late hours. But basically, I think that what we would like for you to do is to take a close look at the staff's comments. The staff, I think, has hit the nail on the head as far as this, their recommendation for disapproval. And if you look at that closely, first of all, the variance is for a reduction of the required setback to just 30 feet from the nearest residential zone. The Traveler Road in this vicinity is a established residential neighborhood, single-family homes. It's not an apartment complex. There are not apartment complexes which are at issue here. These are single-family homes with their backyards backing up literally to the building where this facility is being proposed. The Neighborhood Association does not oppose the use of this property as a restaurant, but the opposition to the proposal as it's been submitted is to the live entertainment and dancing, which, as staff has indicated, first of all, the applicants have not shown a compelling justification for such a drastic variance from 100 feet to 30 feet. I hope you're in possession of Councilman Richard Maloney's comments opposing the proposal, and I hope that you all were given comments that I submitted in writing. Do you have those? Because I have extra copies if you need. I'll leave those with staff. There is precedence for denial of this application in this very neighborhood, within the same block of this neighborhood. In fact, there were two applicants who proposed live entertainment and dancing in the very same block, case C 2003-10, Goshen's Tavern, and C 2003-12, Wendy Gomez. Both of those applications were withdrawn in the face of opposition from the West Gardenside Neighborhood Association. Neither of those, and this is noteworthy, neither of those two applications sought a variance to be within closer than 100 feet, which is what the ordinance requires. This application, on the other hand, requests a variance to be within 30 feet. So even though those were outside the variance boundaries, they were withdrawn in the face of opposition, which most likely would have led to disapproval at that time. I think that regardless of whether there's a DJ system or whether it's live music, the human factors, which were pointed out by the staff, cannot be overlooked, and that includes opening and closing doors. The management has very little control over patrons coming and going, opening and closing doors to the facility, back doors to the facility, front doors to the facility, which would allow the loud music to emanate into the neighborhood. You know, as you know now, the closing times is 2:30 a.m. for establishments that serve alcohol. So 2:30 a.m. is very late for an establishment to be within 30 feet of your home when you're trying to sleep, with loud music emanating from the establishment. I note that there haven't been any detailed submissions of what kind of soundproofing would be implemented at the facility. There's simply a reference to some soundproofing. Well, there are very specific soundproofing requirements in order to keep this kind of music to be heard at a distance of 50 feet. And those have not been incorporated into this proposal. There are other precedent for denying live entertainment and dancing variances. I've cited those in my letter. They're not in the same block as the two were that I mentioned, but they are similar in nature in that they were requesting the same type of variance, and that's the Malibu Pub case and the Anthony Cox case. So in conclusion, since the applicant has utterly failed to demonstrate any special circumstances that warrant such a drastic reduction in the setback called for in the ordinance, and because the effect of granting the conditional use and variance would have a significant adverse impact on the residential neighborhood of Traveler Road, West Gardenside Neighborhood Association and its members respectfully request the denial of this conditional use and variance in accordance with the recommendations of the staff. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions. Thank you. Any questions from the board? No. Yes, sir.
I went over it last time.
Okay. All right.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, are you raising the issue about the noise of this kind of music, I think was what you said, or are you raising the question about the level of noise produced by any music producing, whether it would be a symphony orchestra or a church choir, etc.?
Well, this is amplified music. This is, whether it's a DJ or whether it's a live band, I think you heard the applicant say that it would be amplified with speakers, as opposed to an orchestra that would be acoustic, as opposed to a stringed quartet or a piano player. Those are all non-amplified sources of music. If this application was proposing a piano player without any amplification, we would not be here opposing that. We're here simply to oppose the amplified loud music. And I don't know how many of you may have been in attendance at clubs that have DJs with these amplified speakers, but it can be even louder than live music, and particularly with the bass. The bass is what reverbs, the bass is what you hear. That is likely to cause the most problems for the neighbors.
So you're saying if they have live music and not a DJ, that you would not be here today?
No, live music amplified, we certainly are opposed to.
No. Live music without amplification.
Yes. If it were a piano, if it were a quartet, string quartet or something of that nature, we would not be here.
Thank you.
Sir,
yes.
Have you ever been to Camelot?
No, sir, I haven't. But as I believe you're referring to Camelot Lounge in the same shopping center, that was grandfathered in. And the fact that Camelot Lounge is there has no applicability whatsoever to this proposal.
Well,
that was grandfathered in, as I understand it.
I was curious to ask staff if there's continuous objections by the neighborhood to this noise that's generated by that infamous bar.
We've had, we've had no concerns about it at all.
And when you're talking about people exiting the rear of the building, are you representing the neighborhood behind this shopping center or across Alexandria Drive on the other side? Why would...
Behind the shopping center is where this concern is.
I don't think that the back doors would be opened at all unless there was a fire or they were making deliveries. I think
and I don't know whether that's true or not, and I can't...
But when you look at their floor plan, they've got storage and offices and kitchen at the back, so it doesn't look like an area where the patrons would be coming and going.
I see a bar area that looks to me to be in the back of the area. Typically, with the smoking ordinance, we see a lot of patrons exiting to smoke, and that's been the case, I think, at every establishment that I've visited in the city.
Well...
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
This board's made many conditions on a lot of these places to answer all the concerns this gentleman's brought up as far as hours of operation, type of music, ingress and egress through their doors. I mean, that's certainly regulated by, yes, soundproofing, certainly soundproofing. Some things are regulated by the fire marshal and the building inspector, but times of operation and those types of items have always been handled by this board.
And it seems like we've allowed the 100-foot setback from residential neighborhoods to be encroached on from time to time.
That's correct.
The cases that I'm familiar with that I've looked into all involve areas where there were a substantial other commercial development, where there were other facilities similar to this in nature. Here, the only one that I know of is Camelot Lounge. And as I understand it, that's not a dance floor where patrons dance, and I don't think the music levels would be as loud at that facility.
You said you hadn't been in there, is that right?
That's true, but I can't speak to it first person. So, but nevertheless, the other ones that I'm familiar with that have been approved have been in areas where there have been apartment complexes that were across the street and so forth. So.
Sir, one of the basic point that I was trying to make, that it is not the kind of music, it is the amount of noise, well, sound, the loudness of any kind of music, and that any kind of music within 30 feet of a residence, which could be played till 2:30 in the morning, it seems to me that the staff has made a very valid observation that as a basis for raising serious questions about this application.
Thank you. I would agree, and I would certainly urge everyone to look closely at the staff's recommendation. Mr.
Childers,
one question.
Prior to coming in here, had you had an opportunity to see any of these amended diagrams?
No, I have not.
Moving the entertainment, if you would, banquet facilities towards the front. If you had not, would that make a difference?
No, Your Honor. No, it would not.
Okay. Thank you.
It's still within 30 feet of a residential zone.
Thank you, sir.
And I have two members of the Neighborhood Association here who may want to speak briefly, Phil Crew and Dick Domack.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, anyone else? I would just simply ask, no, please, come forward, please. This is a continuance. We have maybe heard some of what you intend to say. Please
trying not to be repetitive. Thank you.
Phil Crew, 1817 Traveler Road. I'll try not to repeat anything that has already been said. I would just like to say that there's a fundamental difference between neighborhood retail and nightclubs. Nightclubs create noise from patrons, not only from the establishment itself, which is what most of the line of questioning and testimony has been from, but also from patrons during late hours coming and going. And I would simply say that that can reasonably be expected to have an adverse impact on a quiet residential neighborhood. There's already some impact, I would say, from, I can't prove it, but it is hard to know the direction of, for instance, subwoofing stereos. They're an annoyance, I'm sure, to many of us. And when I hear that, and I look up, it seems to be coming from the direction of the Camelot, something I can't prove, and it is, that situation is grandfathered in, and I simply say that nightclubs and retail, a neighborhood shopping center, are two different activities, and this would change the nature of the neighborhood. It would have an adverse impact, and the sound is not limited to that which might emanate from the establishment itself, but also from patrons coming and going at late hours. And that's the main point I would like to make.
I have a question for you, please. So you were saying that the noise you, quote, unquote, think may be coming from Camelot doesn't bother you as much as the noise you think you're going to hear coming from this particular
It does. The noise from loud car stereos, sometimes late, does bother me.
But has the neighborhood ever complained to the office?
I can't say. The neighborhood association, to my knowledge, has not formally complained, but people have talked about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else at this time?
I've got a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Mr. Shumba.
For Mr. Hudson, Mr. Childers actually just said that if there was a piano bar, they wouldn't have a problem with it. Are you all adamant about having dancing and a DJ there? Would you be opposed to withdrawing that and having it be a piano bar, for example?
Well, I feel like we've already taken enough stuff away from what we was trying to do in the first place, and I have, on the last meeting, the hearing that we came to, I have explained how we would soundproof all these walls, kind of, answering the question that the one gentleman spoke about. But I have already taken the steps to soundproof those back walls there by putting soundproof foam in there. Actually, on this diagram, this particular diagram that I like the most, because when we took out the storage space, by taking out those walls, taking the front storage space out and putting the storage space in the back, they gave us 50 more feet away from the residential area. And by applying that soundproof frame wall there would just even keep the sound just even more. It would add to it just that much more. And it's already soundproof foam in the back wall already there that I paid for $400. I had a receipt for that too. So, I mean, I've just tried to show the neighborhood association some of our views, but they didn't want to meet and talk about it. So I'm basically just here talking to you guys about it.
Mr. Hudson, do you have certain limited hours of operation, or at least limited hours for the live music that you would consider?
Yes, sir. Not only that, the live music is not every day. It's just, on weekends when young adults may want to come out and have a good time or something like that. Watch a basketball game or anything. It's not just particularly guys hanging out, guys just out in the back smoking anything. As far as I'm concerned, that back soundproof wall would limit any exiting going out of the back door, period. We will have to put an access there for fire or anything like that.
There's two doors.
Yeah, well, we're closing it off by putting that soundproof wall there. There are 2 doors there, but we'll close those 2 doors off and just make one exit door just for fire or anything like that. But
if you've already gone to the expense to soundproof the building and the dance floor is there, the walls are moved, would you consider coming back for a hearing, what do you call it,
Review?
A review? So if there were lots of complaints in the first 30 days, this might be revoked.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, actually, it would be more than 30 days because we still have to do the board of, well, the rest of our inspections.
Well, maybe it would be 6 months.
Yes, sir.
But if you don't have a lot of additional financial outlay in front of you, maybe
that'd be fine.
Trying it out would be
that'd be fine.
A compromise.
Right, that's no problem.
I have a question for the staff, please. Hearing this discussion and some of the modifications that have been suggested, what are your thoughts about the possibility, what are your thoughts of regarding the whether or not these ideas are good or not?
I think a big issue still on the table would be the level of amplification for the music. And we've struggled with that in the past, how to condition things along those lines. So that would be the big concern.
Yeah. Do you think it's reasonable that if they did not use amplification, that there would be any infringement upon the neighborhood in terms of noise or distraction? You know, you have to ask yourself, would you like to live within 30 feet of something, you know, of this type of business?
I'm not sure no amplification is an option here, but just having 2 small speakers, I guess, is a certain level of amplification. I'm not a technical person along those lines, but.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bowen?
I would just like to point out one thing that this board doesn't seem to be considering is that the zoning ordinance requires a 100-foot setback. In order to vary that, you've got to come up with some reason that this piece of property is different from the typical, and there's a reason why the 100-foot doesn't apply here. The board can't just say, we think they're going to be careful, so we're just going to waive the 100-foot. And even with the 100-foot variance, the zoning ordinance requires the maximum feasible soundproofing. So the fact that they're going to provide soundproofing is not a special circumstance that legally justifies granting the variance. So there has to be some kind of finding that there is a topographical reason. I know a lot of times it's where, yes, there is residential within 100 feet, but it's sitting up on a much higher elevation, it's sitting back, it's an apartment complex where much of the residential use is, in addition, elevated as opposed to just linear distancing. I know we've dealt with a lot of things like that, or there is a line of commercial use in between, which is a buffer or a vegetative buffer, something that's going to alleviate the impact. But there's got to be a special circumstance that justifies not applying the blanket requirements of the zoning ordinance to this particular piece of property. There has to be something that makes it different.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Powell.
That is very important.
I just want to make a statement about the facility next door. The facility next door has no soundproofing whatsoever. I've walked in there and I've talked to the management. I've asked him, could I just take a look at what he was doing as far as his facility, and he has no soundproofing whatsoever. He has his area of entertainment is smack dead in the back of the building, just as close as the back wall as it could possibly be. The same company that he had put in his music and stuff like that I would be using as well. So he said he hasn't had any complaints in a very, very long time. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. The biggest difference right now, as you know, that's
Yes,
a
sir.
grandfathered in type situation. If there's no other questions for Mrs. Hudson? Yes.
Great, great.
Thank you, and we'll hear from the rest of the opposition.
Okay, thanks.
My name is Richard Domek. I live at 1725 Traveler Road. I'd like to say, I think, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 things here, and I hope not to be repetitive. One thing I want to say is that I looked at the application from the people who have requested, who have instigated this appeal, initiated this appeal. And on the original application, it says that they could not move the entertainment area, which is the dance floor, that it could not be moved from the rear of the building because to do so would produce structural damage in the building. Now we've seen 3 or 4 diagrams where it has been moved, so I think that's a bit of an issue. How can something change from the way it was in the original application? And it does state that in the original application. We have a copy of it here. I think the second thing I'd say is that the issue of music, amplified or not, I think it has to be treated a little bit carefully. If there were, for example, room to have a symphony orchestra inside this building, which there isn't, but if there were, and if the symphony orchestra were not amplified, I think it still could be heard outside the building. And I think a brass band would be the same thing. A brass band wouldn't be amplified, but if you've ever sat at a band concert close to one of those bands, you know you can hear them from a long ways off. So amplification is part of the issue. I think with amplified sound, you can take even a piano and drown everybody else out. So I think the amplification is an issue. The size of it's basically the noise level that the music is going to create. I think that's the issue, whether it's amplified or not. Amplification, I think, would tend to exacerbate the problems that might arise. The third thing I think I'd say is, and I am a musician. I'm not an acoustic expert, but I am a performing musician, and I teach music at the University of Kentucky. Sound, the way I understand it, is omnidirectional. I mean, it moves in waves. Just as you drop a rock or a stone in a pond, it moves out in concentric waves. So, yes, you can channel it in one direction, but it is omnidirectional. So if there's a sound source that's loud within the building, it's going to emanate to all the exterior walls of the building. Now, if that one room or one wall in the back there near the storage area is soundproofed, it's still going to, the sound is going to make its way through all those doorways, above all those partitions, to the back wall, and to the front wall and the side walls also. So I think that's a bit of concern, too. Along with that, I would note that I'm not sure we're talking about soundproofing as much as sound reduction here. And I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed also. So those are the objections I would raise and the concerns I would raise at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Domek. Any questions? No. Do we have any other objectors that wish to speak at this time? No? Okay. Personally, I can appreciate Mr. and Mrs. Hudson's entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, as Mrs. Bowen did point out, you know, we still have a 100-foot setback that we've got to deal with. Any wishes from the staff, board?
I'm ready to make a motion if the discussion
That'll be fine. I'll ask for the motion at this time.
I move that CV 2007-80, James Lamont Hudson's appeal for a conditional use permit to allow dancing and light entertainment, e.g. live bands, etc., at a restaurant bar and a variance to reduce the required 100-foot setback from a residential zone to 30 feet in a neighborhood business zone on property located at 1765 Alexandria Drive be disapproved for the following reasons. The proposed use will not be located at least 100 feet from the residential zone along Traveler Road and therefore does not comply with the setback requirement established in Article 8-16D5 of the zoning ordinance, and there are no special circumstances as a basis for approval. Second, absent of a variance to reduce the 100-foot setback requirement, any further consideration of conditional use permit is essentially moot.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Is there a second?
I'll second, but I'd like to make one brief comment, if I might. I want to commend Mr. and Mrs. Hudson for everything that they've done. You all have done a great deal of work in trying to modify the building, and I really do applaud you for that as good business people in our community. But as Ms. Bell has indicated, you know, we're not allowed to do this by our zoning ordinance, and in light of that, the overwhelming opposition by the neighborhood association has to take into consideration. So I second the motion to disapprove.
Could I request one change to the motion? I think what you did was you took the two reasons for disapproval of the requested conditional use, and you made a change, especially in the first one. But could we also still include and the other findings as presented by the staff as bases for your motion? Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
There's 3 reasons listed on the back here as far as reasons for disapproval for the variance. Everyone in agreement and with that. Motion has been made and seconded for disapproval of CV 2007-80, James Lamont Hudson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
I think it's also important to note that if the restaurant, the Camelot, were to apply today, this zoning regulation would require a disapproval if they would ask for the same thing that you're asking for. If they were grandfathered in before, because they existed before this regulation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Motion for disapproval passed. Next case would be A 2007-91 Greer Land Company, Man of War, LLC, who appeals for administrative review to allow a 13-square-foot sign above a roof line off an entrance canopy in a neighborhood business B1 zone, property located 3094 Hemsdale Place. Yes, is the applicant here? I'll tell you what, first, since this is recommended for disapproval by the staff, I would ask to hear from the staff.
This appeal relates to signage that's been requested for a new Cheddar's restaurant that's under construction at Brighton Place Shops, just a little bit north of the intersection of Todd's Road and Man of War Boulevard. The issue is signage proposed on the top of an entrance feature, and I'll put up a picture here that'll give you a close-up shot of the entrance to the new restaurant. Building inspection has determined that the signage that's proposed, which is just on the top of this round, I think it's copper feature at this entrance, it's a roofed entrance. The signage is proposed to go on top of that feature, so building inspection considered it to be a roof sign. The zoning is not an issue in this case because roof signs are prohibited in all zones. So building inspection denied that permit request. There's nothing that's been submitted with the application to suggest or support or argue that for whatever reason it's not a roof sign on the part of the appellant. So we felt that Division of Building Inspection made the correct call in this case. The next slide or picture I'll put up kind of shows more of the details of the signage.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Do you by chance have a picture that shows exactly
yeah, that's what we're going to get up
here talking about? Okay. Yes, please.
Okay. So the issue here is the casual cafe part of the signage, which is just above that copper round feature that goes around this roofed entrance. In our staff report, we came up with some options that we would hope that they would consider that would avoid the need for any type of appeal. Based on visiting the site and seeing the construction that's already taken place there, at this point I would certainly recommend that they consider the option of just adding Casual Cafe to the Cheddar's part of the restaurant, which would place it on the wall. It's the main building wall above this roofed entrance feature. That would be in compliance with the zoning ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Any questions? I'll ask building inspection. Do they have anything to add at this point? No? Thank you. Any questions from the staff? To the staff from the board? No, if not.
I have a question to legal. Are we in the same situation here as we were in the last one, please?
Without having heard anything that the applicant may have to say, at this point, I would have to agree with the staff that by locating this sign above the roof of the entranceway, it qualifies under our zoning ordinance definition as a roof sign, which is not permissible. Obviously, the applicant needs to have the opportunity to argue that it does not in some way, shape, or form fit that definition and therefore is permissible. But if this board finds that it is a roof sign pursuant to our zoning ordinance definition, then it cannot be permitted.
I guess my question would be to engineering. You're saying that the concrete part that's going straight up through the front of the building above the gutter level would be considered a roof?
Yes, sir.
What you're saying?
That's right.
That's what I'm asking about. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a little confused. I'm not so sure that it is. It is a roof. It looks more like an awning to me. But because I would think when you're talking about roof signs, you're talking about attachments, and there's no attachment here to the roof. And I would think that this would be, subject to interpretation.
That's why we're here.
Mr. Hume, as a follow-up to Mr. Stout's question, I think he's asking about the rock parapet wall, or whatever you want to call it, that goes up where the Cheddar sign is located. I don't know if do you have this?
Yes, sir.
I think that's what he was asking.
Without the sign, it's just a parapet.
Are you saying the rock that extends up?
Yes, sir.
And the sign is allowed there?
Again, it's just it's a judgment call. I mean, we've gone through this problem. We even had an extremely obvious case with CC's Pizza.
So, okay. So clarify for me then. Are we talking about the Cheddar sign in itself or the Casual Cafe sign?
It's my understanding it's the Cheddar's.
The only part that's at issue is that part that's Casual Cafe.
Okay.
Because
then that would be over.
Yeah, it's over the roof
of that signage.
of the entryway.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the Cheddar sign itself is okay, but not for zoning ordinance.
I think the staff's feeling was, for instance, if Casual Cafe were down on that rounded front of that projecting roof section, it would not be a roof sign because it would be along the front of that canopy or projecting roof. But the fact that it is set above that roof line causes it to fit within the definition of a roof sign under the staff's interpretation.
So if they were to raise that fencing, what it looks like across the top there, another 6 inches, and put Cheddars across that fencing and Casual Calf down on that copper line there, they still be within regulation?
Well, the Cheddar sign is a wall sign. It's against the wall of the structure. It's not suspended above the roof. So it's not, that's not a problem at all.
So the Cheddar sign's okay. You're talking about the Casual Calf?
Just the Casual Cafe sign. That's the only part that projects above an existing roof line.
Now, that's like kicking the chicken out of the hen house to me.
So, okay, if everyone is straight on what we're talking about now, I'll let the applicant speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Glenn Hoskins. I'm the attorney here representing the applicant, or the appellant, which is Greer Lane Company. I'll introduce them now. They'll come up and say a few words in just a minute. Phil Greer, who's sitting here in the front row, is the principal of Greer Lane Company. Todd Ott is with CMW. He's an architect, and he will come up in just a few minutes and help straighten out this confusion. Y'all have caused me to skip some of my introductory remarks. You cut right to the chase when you got into the issue here of the roof. Basically, to explain what this is, the second drawing of my handout is on page 2. Just to clarify what we're talking about, this whole appeal is about that red lettering there that curves around the front that says Casual Cafe. This has nothing to do with the Cheddar sign, which is set back on that on the stone wall back behind. And basically, our case is built around two interpretations and two concepts. Number one, we do not believe that this is a roof sign. As has been pointed out, the sign ordinance prohibits roof signs in any zoning category. But it's our contention this is not a roof sign. If you go back to the history of what a roof sign is and what led to prohibitions against roof signs, we can all remember back years ago we traveled through the countryside, and you'd be on a highway and you'd see back in the distance some like a restaurant or truck stop, and up on the top of the roof, suspended by 2x4s, would be these giant letters that would say "Eat Here" or "Beer" or something like that. And that is what basically gave credence to the notion of prohibiting what a lot of people think would be a tacky sign, is called a roof sign in all zoning categories. This extension in the front of the building that has this curved area is not a roof. I've actually gone to Webster's Dictionary to look up what a roof is, and they say that a roof is the external upper covering of a house or other building. In other words, the thing up on top of the building. When we all came in this building today, we walked through the front door of the Government Center. We walked underneath the canopy, the covering, there down the first floor. And I dare say if any of us asked where the roof was, we'd all point up to the top of this building. Nobody in this building would say that a roof is down there over Main Street on the first level of this building. But let me give you a little bit of the background about why we're here and what's led to all this. Mr. Greer will come up and talk on his own, but he is he's one of the developers of this Cheddar's restaurant concept. He got in on the ground floor. They've got something like 57 restaurants across the country. He personally owns 17 of them. And other than the very first Cheddar's restaurant, which they opened here in Lexington, which was sort of like the model unit, since then they've gone back and developed their prototype. Every one of those Cheddar's restaurants has this logo, this Casual Cafe design, as part of their standard franchise package. It is a requirement of all Cheddar's restaurants to have this type of package and signage and other amenity criteria. Y'all probably have all been to Cheddar's to eat. It's a wonderful restaurant. It's been hugely successful. They do it because of delicious food and competitive price points, but also a very attractive package of amenities, visual amenities inside the restaurant and outside. And I've got some photographs in here that you can look at your leisure to see about really what a nice job they do in these restaurants. In fact, Phil will tell you in a few minutes, they've won some awards in other cities for beautification and what a nice job they do aesthetically. And the key to that is when you have a national franchise program, you have to have uniform standards that all of the restaurants throughout the country have to adhere to. You can't have exceptions throughout the country. And to be honest with you, when they were getting ready to open this restaurant, when they sent the sign company down to get the sign permit, they were shocked, taken aback when this was rejected under the notion that this is somehow prohibited as a roof sign, especially here in Phil's hometown. Again, this is Todd will explain in just a minute from an architect's point of view that this curved extension is not the roof. That is an architectural amenity, and actually the red script of Casual Cafe is attached to a wire mesh that extends vertically up from that. And this picture number 2 looks like a copper substance. Actually, I think it's some other kind of metal that they paint because everybody's stealing copper these days. But the wire mesh extends straight up vertical from that curved area. So in our mind, that is not on that. Even if that were construed to be a roof, that would not be a roof sign because it's attached to that wire mesh, which is part of the vertical plane of that canopy. So with that in mind, let me just introduce Phil and then Todd to give you some words of wisdom on the nuances of this from an architectural point of view. Phil?
I hope no one's had a bad meal at Cheddar's and they'll take that out against me. But I got into this thing by surprise. We got our plans approved and so on, like we do in every other place we go. We did not have the sign package drawn on the plans. I went down and or I wouldn't have gotten this far. I've spent a lot of money to find this out, and so it's kind of become as a real shock. But it's one of those last situations that has bitten me real hard. The franchisor requires this sign package. I actually designed it, drew the plans and so on, and they adopted it, and now it looks like I'm in violation with my own franchisor. So what really shocks me is that every single community in the United States, as far as I know, has pretty much the same sign orders we do here in Fayette County, and no one allows a roof sign. And I know if you've ever been on Route 66, you see all those roof signs, the big eat signs and so on, and that's what this thing was all about back in 1950s, in the 50s. But we've passed 56 in a row, and not one single community has classified this as a roof. And so this has never really come up, so I kind of got in this by accident. But here we are today to plead our case and throw our mercy here, but does anyone have any questions for me?
Questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Greer.
Thank you.
My name is Todd Ott. I represent CMW Architects and represent Phil as the architect for the Cheddar's franchise stores. We've done all of his franchise stores throughout really the Southeast, and have, as Phil said, have produced this same product in every municipality we worked in and have not run into this kind of interpretation. What I wanted to ask you to consider, though, is first, we understand the need for the prohibition on rooftop signs. And we agree with that prohibition, and we in no way are asking for some variance in that prohibition because we don't want a building next to us with a rooftop sign on it either. What we would offer for your consideration, though, is that entrance portico there has a fascia over it. It's not the roof of the building. The roof of the building is on up. And technically, as we evaluate the height of a building, because we have to meet height area ratios and requirements for building classifications and zones, that roof, that line right there is not the roof line that the building height is calculated by. It's not considered the roof. The roof on top of the building is what's considered the roof, and that's what the elevation of the building is calculated on. Secondarily, that's not a roof. It's a fascia. The copper, solid copper, the copper mesh behind it, the sign on the copper mesh all constitute the fascia of an entrance marquee that's composed on the front of the building. It's not offered as a roof. It is offered as a fascia, as a marquee, trademark marquee entry to the building. What we're asking for is what we believe a fair interpretation of the prohibition against rooftop signs. And if you'll permit me, in the same developmental area, may I offer these here?
Yes, please.
In the same developmental area is the Regal Cinemas in Hamburg. This has a very similar condition, as you can see right there, except at a much more exaggerated degree, where there is an entry portico, and on top of that entry portico is the letters R-E-G-A-L. The same type condition, which has been previously approved by the authorities having jurisdiction in this city. Again, I would contend that that's an appropriate and proper interpretation of the prohibition against rooftop signs because that's not the roof. The roof is behind and up. It's not down in front. Since that is the interpretation on that building in the exact same developmental area within a quarter-mile radius of where we're at. We're not asking for a variance. We're just asking for a consistency in the interpretation.
If I could, let me read you the definition of a roof sign, okay? And then you can make your own judgment of that. It's a sign which projects above the cornice of a flat roof or above the top edge of any roof, including the ridge line of or a gable or hipped roof. So it's specific. Now, do you want to call this a covered porch where people can stand and wait to be entered into the restaurant, or do you want to call it a canopy? And I think that's where you're going to split the hair here. But the definition is where it extends above a flat roof.
Or do we acknowledge that the section on the Cheddar's building where Casual Cafe is written is simply an integral part of the fascia of that portion of the building? Which would
where we're here.
At least be a fair consideration, I think.
Jim, can you comment on the slide that's on the screen?
No. I think it's part of the integral part of the fascia, and that's what he's talking about. I think
Cinema 16 is. Regal is not. If you'll look at the second image, you'll see the degree of projection. There's maybe a better image for it.
Well, I think that may have come to the board.
And I think this is a fair interpretation of the prohibition against rooftop signs.
Well, we've had a number of these cases come to the board, especially in Hamburg, where they've had the signs on the large parapets. So that's why we're in this judgment call. The way our ordinance reads, we hold a finer line to what we think. The sign ordinance hasn't kept up with new urban construction. It hasn't kept up with the new ideas of signage. So that's why we hold a harder line on what we have to work with from our definitions.
Jim, as you read that, as I read it, the big concern to me is that I think there's an assumption on which that what you read is based, and that is that it's somehow like attached to that roof. This is attached to the wall.
What is attached to the wall?
This. It's attached to the wall, right here, from here to here.
Well, I guess it's a matter of what you call a porch roof. I consider this to be a cantilevered porch roof. And I'm assuming that's what we looked at when we evaluated this.
But it's...
Regal's is obviously, that's an architectural design built into the parapet of the building. I mean, it's obvious what that is. This is a judgment call.
And I completely agree with you. I just wanted to offer with all due respect how we interpret that.
It's a cantilevered structural element of this building to serve as cover for those people going into that building. This is an aesthetic value to bring attention to the building. I mean, that's my interpretation of it. And as architect, and myself, I've studied architecture, so that's my view on this.
I understand. The spirit of the prohibition against rooftop signs was to limit these large signs.
I agree. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I don't believe that this violates that spirit. I don't believe what we're asking for violates that spirit. This has been approved under the same guidelines, and we're just asking for consistency in the interpretation.
That's why we're here, and that's why we make our calls the way we do and let the board.
Well, I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? No? Yes, sir?
I just want to point out in this handout I distributed, in addition to a number of the photographs, and point in here to show really what an attractive building this is, and the Casual Cafe part, what a insignificant part of it is from a distance. You really have to look hard to even find it on there, but it's a very critical part of their franchise concept. And then back on the very last page are some proposed findings of fact that we would suggest to help you solve the dilemma that you're finding yourself in. Again, we maintain this is not a roof sign, and we maintain that this extension is not a roof; it's a canopy. But on the other hand, if you're going to find that it is that the wire mesh that extends up the vertical part of the canopy, that this is attached to it, so it's part of the canopy and not a sign on top of the canopy. So two different ways in our logic to overcome any difficulty you might have. So we're glad to answer any questions you have. And in conclusion, would ask that you find in our favor in our request for this administrative appeal. We'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, any other questions from the board? Are we ready for a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Mr. Stout.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that A2007-91 Greer Land Company Manowar LLC appeals for an administrative review to allow a 13 square foot sign above a roof line of an entrance canopy in the neighborhood business B1 zone on property located at 3094 Hempstead Place, Council District 6, be approved based on the following findings and conditions. The extension above the entrance area of the restaurant is not the roof of the structure as contemplated in the definitions of a roof sign in the zoning ordinance. It is more comparable to a canopy than a roof, covering only an opening area that an enclosed and not an enclosed structure. Number two, the proposed sign does not project above the level of the roof of the structure. In appearance, the impact of this sign is comparable to a wall sign, and as such, is permitted so long as it does not exceed the applicable limitations for wall signs. Number three, alternatively, the proposed sign also more closely resembles a canopy or an awning sign in that the structure at issue serves only as a canopy over the entranceway. The conditions are, number one, the proposed sign shall comply with the limitations of applications permitted wall signs, and number two, the wall sign shall be constructed in compliance with the plan submitted.
I would second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded for approval. Are there any other questions? If not, I'll call for a vote. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, folks.
It's a lovely design.
Okay, move back to our remaining case. Thank you for being patient with us. V 2007-92, Williams and Associates Architects appeals for a variance to increase the allowable height of gates and columns in the front yard from 6 feet to 7 feet 11 inches in a single-family residential R1B zone on property located at 1620 Richmond Road, Council District 5.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Did y'all take action on Clayton signs? Was that postponed, or did it get lost in the shuffle? Or? I know they want to postpone. We usually get a letter from them, but this time around we had some conversations on the phone and we never got a letter, but we do know that they want to postpone. And they're not here today.
I thought we did, but Wanda, do you have any knowledge on that? No? To make sure that we take care of that, then I would ask for a postponement of A 2007-73 Clayton signs.
So move. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The Clayton signs is postponed for until the November hearing. Now then, I'm sorry. Mr. Williams, are you representing the applicant here? Okay.
Thank you very much. What we are asking for, I think, is fairly straightforward, And I'm not going to read the staff's recommendations because you have that in front of you. We would just echo that we agree with staff's recommendations and the reasons that they give for approval for this variance. This is the property on Richmond Road, and in yellow, what I have here in yellow is showing the area of fence that we have permitted already and is under construction. The variance is not for a fence variance. It's for the gate here at the driveway and the gate here at the sidewalk. And you can see here is a picture of the house, and I've had superimposed on there the construction of the fence as we're asking the variance for. And it also, as you can see, sits well back, sort of. This is a shared driveway, a shared entrance, I should say, and this sits, well back from the Richmond Road corridor right here. And then if you look at the other gate, this is the pedestrian gate. That is from Richmond Road, and that's right here. Sidewalk and things were already in place. We are redoing the sidewalk, but the sidewalk was an existing piece of the landscape. This fence represents roughly 400 feet of fencing. The two gates represent about 21 and a half feet of gates. And it does say under staff recommendations, just to bring that a couple small points, is that there's even some in the zoning ordinance. They acknowledge that there's some question whether or not how gates apply in terms of fence, whether it's fence or whether it's gates, and that it's appropriate to have quite often that you find gates at a taller elevation than a fence to give it some sense of scale and sense of entry. It does also acknowledge, of course, that in the past that they have looked at it as if it's part of the fence, but it's ambiguous, and so I guess that's why we're here to discuss just that point. The other thing is that staff pointed out that there are reasons in terms of scale and proportion. It would be appropriate to have. That's why I did the house in the background. You can see that it's a fairly large scale house, as most of the houses are along Richmond Road, and that a 6-foot fence at the gates, etc., would give the appearance of something out of scale and out of proportion with the residents and with the neighborhood, and the staff acknowledged that also. And also the staff has also pointed out that there's another property, two houses to the left, that requested a variance for a fence. I acknowledge it was a backyard fence versus a front yard fence. As you know, by code, you can have an 8-foot fence in the backyard, and they got a variance to go to 10 feet. And my only reason for pointing that out is that the same reasons that this board made granted that variance had to deal with scale and proportions also. And we're asking that you take those same considerations when you ask for this variance, for this variance that we're asking. And we are not asking for a variance of the entire fence as the other one was, but just for the two gates for the 21.5 feet. Be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? No. Mr. Williams, as far as it looks like you're talking about a variance to 7 feet 11 inches.
That's correct. That's at the highest point.
Does that include the ornamental tops, whether they're lights or the balls there?
Yes. It includes the highest point of the gate. I think. Does not. Okay.
I think the lights are included. It's the point of the gate.
No. Yeah. The 7 foot. No, the 7 foot 11 is to the top of the columns.
Top of the columns. It
Yes.
doesn't include the ornamental tops, whether they're lights or balls.
That's right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I guess one other question from my standpoint right now. This appears to be quite a bit of difference if you measure from the outside to the inside, it appears that the front yard has been backfilled.
The only part of the front yard that has been backfilled in this fence is if you look at, if you can pick the site plan here. The front yard is already basically a flat yard, and then it was already contoured and had a step off right there where we put the fence, where it graded down to the street. In this corner, in the right corner, right here, there was probably maybe 8 inches of fall that we leveled off right there, but that was only to flatten out the yard. It was not to.
So measurement from the pedestrian gate or the drive-through gate,
it's the same.
Whether you measure inside or out.
Yeah, because the hill went over and tapered down. We put it on top of the hill.
Okay.
So the measurement from grade up is basically the same on both sides.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? No. Do you have anybody else that would like to speak at this time, or do we just go to the opposition? No?
Well, we'd get a chance to come back if we want to.
Sure.
Right? Okay.
As far as opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Jim Hodge. As I said before, I'm here representing Catherine Woodford Clay and John R. Neal. Also noticed, and it caused me to remember something, that Dr. Stevens is in the audience here and may have an interest in this. In any event, as Ms. Boland said in an earlier case, in order to grant a variance under our zoning ordinance, there are certain required findings that the board must make. And as you all well know, they're set out on the first page of your agenda. And I won't belabor them in great detail, but amongst the things that the board must find or must consider is, one, whether the granting of the variance will alter the essential character of the general vicinity. Second thing you have to consider is whether the request for the variance arises from special circumstances which do not generally apply to the land in the general vicinity. A third thing that you are to consider is whether the strict application of the zoning ordinance would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of his or her land. And then finally, you are to consider whether the circumstances that give rise to the application are something that the applicant caused subsequent to the adoption of the zoning regulation. And those are set forth in item C on the first page of your agenda in the first sentence, and then in subparagraphs A, B, C, and D. Now, as you all know, Richmond Road is one of the major spokes into downtown Lexington. In fact, I would dare say that of all the major spokes into downtown Lexington, with the possible exception of a portion of Versailles Road on the side which Keeneland is located, Richmond Road is the most scenic entranceway and vista into the city of Lexington. And it has been that way for approximately 80 years when restrictions were imposed on this property up and down this portion of Richmond Road that created a 130-foot front setback requirement. And if you drive up and down this section of Richmond Road all the way from the Shriners Hospital down to Ashland Avenue on the, I guess, south side on the left as you're coming into town, on the right as you're going out of town, you will see that in that entire section, basically, there are large, and as Tom Wilms said, there are large imposing houses on that side of Richmond Road, and they all observe this 130-foot setback. And if you drive down through there, you will see that there are, in observance of this setback requirement, which in the deeds, in the chain of title of this property, specifically prohibits fences within the front 130 feet of these lots, you will see that there are no front fences on any of the lots on this side of Richmond Road, all the way from Ashland Avenue to the Shriners Hospital. Now, another thing, Dr. Stevens sitting here caused me to remember, a long, long time ago, my now retired partner Herb Sled, I think, was on the board of the Shriners Hospital. And as a young lawyer, he got me to represent the Shriners Hospital in what for some people, I guess, is now what the Shriners Hospitals always look like. But it didn't always look like that. And a total revision of the Shriners Hospital was done some 20 plus years ago. I think Dr. Stevens could probably tell you more accurately than I remember. But at the time, the new structure was built and then the old structure was taken down. But I remember being impressed when I was retained by the Shriners that the great diligence they exercised to, one, make sure, even though they couldn't tear down their old structure and then build their new structure, the great diligence they took, one, to make sure that their new structure was in keeping with the setback for the rest of the street, and that their new structure was in keeping with the scale of the rest of the street. And even though they had to move their structure forward, they then scaled it down so that it was in keeping with the rest of Richmond Road at this time from their property or from the property immediately outside their property all the way down to Ashland Avenue. Now, in this case, going from 6 feet under the zoning ordinance to 9 feet would only make a bad situation worse as far as keeping in scale with these things. And I might submit that while in isolation this fence is an attractive fence, Lexington, Kentucky is not Charleston. Lexington, Kentucky is not New Orleans. And this neighborhood does not look like Charleston or New Orleans with gated and fenced front yards. All of the houses in this area are set back the 130 feet. All of the houses in this entire strip are very imposing. So let's go back and look at the findings that KRS 100.243 requires to be made in order for the applicant to be entitled to this variance. One, would the granting of the variance alter the essential character of the general vicinity? Of course it will. The height of the fence is subsumed within the idea of the fence altogether. There are no fences on this side of Richmond Road, and I might add that the underlying existence or permission of the fence is an issue which would be addressed. But there are no fences on this side of Richmond Road, and placing a fence on this side of Richmond Road, particularly one that has gates up to 9 feet high, will vastly alter the character of the neighborhood. Now, this is not the case with fences in the rear yard. Fences in the rear yard happen to be permitted, specifically permitted by the restrictive covenants that govern this property, and properties up and down the street already have fences in the rear yard. Therefore, the variance down the street, 2 houses, is no basis whatsoever for granting this variance, because the variance down the street doesn't affect the character of this neighborhood at all. Whereas for the first time, putting a 9-foot fence in the front yard with these big gates, while that might look great in Charleston or New Orleans, it will vastly change the character of this neighborhood. And if it does, then this variance is not permitted by KRS 100.243. Now, in deciding this, the statute also requires for you to look at whether special circumstances that do not generally apply to the land in the general vicinity apply to this house. There are no such special circumstances whatsoever. As Tom Wilms told you, all the houses up and down this street are very handsome, very imposing houses. More importantly, all the houses on this street are set back 130 feet with no front fences. Then the next consideration you're asked to look at is, will the deprivation of this variance deny the applicant a reasonable use of his land? Well, of course it won't. People have been living on this street in the same type houses under the exact same circumstances for 81 years since the restrictions were originally imposed without having gated, locked, tall front fences. So it will not deny the property owner the reasonable use of their property. Finally, you're asked to consider, is the need for this variance the result of something that the applicant's done subsequent to the adoption of the zoning ordinance? Well, of course it is. The applicant wants to build a fence, and he wants to build a fence after the adoption of the zoning regulation. So variances are to be granted due to something unique about the land which causes a hardship on the property owner, not something that the property owner voluntarily decides to do subsequent to the adoption of the zoning ordinance. So for all these reasons, I don't know whether Dr. Stevens wants to talk or not, but for all these reasons, we would ask you to preserve the character of this section of Richmond Road and deny this request.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Anyone else that would like to speak at this time? Councilman Stevens, welcome. You were not here. Let me get to my brief swearing in. Do you swear the information you're about to give shall be the truth?
As I know it to be.
Thank you.
My interest in this is as a district councilman, but also I've been chairman of the Corridors Committee, which is a committee of the Council of the Urban County Government that deals with the major arteries that come in and out of Lexington. And we have, of course, one of the major arteries we work on continually is the Richmond Road. And it is, as was mentioned, a showplace in our community. And when I saw the construction beginning on the fence, I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be. But I called building inspection. They said, yes, it was legal and approved to have a fence there. And I came today to kind of educate myself a little further and hear the discussion. Personally, from my point of view, a fence is out of character along that street and road for one house when the others do not have it. We do have some Richmond Road ordinances which are related to landscape and development, and the Corridors Committee is responsible for hearing variances on that. And when this was not presented to us, I assumed that there was no variance necessary to erect the fence. We do have this ordinance that relates, and I brought it with me, to landscape and development stops at Shinaway on the way in. So we have no jurisdiction over this item, but I came as a citizen to hear what was going on. Thank you.
I have a question, please. Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
You're not saying that these property owners shouldn't have a fence. You're saying it's the type of fence they're trying to put up. Is that what you're saying?
No, I was saying if I lived in the house, I don't think I would put a fence there.
But you would have the right to do that?
As I understand it, that's correct, but I depend more on the lawyer to tell me that.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Stevens, with what you just mentioned, sorry. Councilman Stevens, what you just mentioned right there at the end as far as the landscape committee, landscape review, is that right? You said that stopped at Shenaway?
Yes, not going out but coming in. Okay. It goes from the entrance to Jacobson Park into Shenaway.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else that would like to speak at this time? No. Question for the staff, I guess, or building inspection. Yes, you may. Before I ask the question, go ahead. Come ahead.
Thank you. I forgot to, I wanted to add these. These were just letters given to me today by the owners where they had received letters of support from their adjoining neighbors to the left and right of the piece of property. So I'd like to add that, if I would, please. And just a few other quick comments. I know time's getting a little bit late. You know, first of all, and I know you know this, I just want to bring it up again, though, that, you know, the question is not the fence and whether or not someone likes the style of the fence or someone likes, you know, whether they live there, whether they would put a fence there, or whether they think it looks too much like Charleston. You know, that's an opinion and that's style. And everybody has one. The fence is permittable. And the owner has elected to put the fence up, so that's not the question here. I think you know that. Second of all, setback's not the question here. You know, yes, all the houses are 130-some feet back or whatever they are from the road. It's not. We're not violating any of that. So setback's not even an issue. I don't know why. You know, why that would even be discussed. And also, and I know you know this also, within the things that you have to prove when you're asking for a variance, that is assuming that it has to cover a lot of different types of variances that are being asked for. And you get to some small things like this, I consider, relatively speaking, a small thing. It doesn't really apply. It's hard to find applications in all cases, you know, say, okay, well, yeah, you know, if I was asking for a variance for a reduced setback, you know, that would be something totally different. You know, the fence is permittable, and I believe that we have demonstrated and met the criteria and would give you the ability to give us, grant this variance based on your staff's recommendations and your staff's opinions about that we would not be circumventing the intent of the ordinance, because we're not asking for a variance for the fence. We're asking for a variance of some gates, two minor gates, relatively speaking, that, according to even staff, is in question whether or not, if they deal with it as fence. And yes, you know, we're wanting to put a fence up. And we have the right to do that. So anyway, I won't belabor the point, but I will answer any other questions since I've made some statements.
Thank you. I have a question for the staff. And personally speaking, I don't have a problem with your fence. But I have a question for the staff. Why would you approve the gates to be higher than the fence, as is my question? Why would you do that? Especially at the center point. Why wouldn't you have that center point at the same height as the gate structure itself?
Well, I think at a certain point with all this, it gets into a matter of preference and what some people like, some people don't. We just looked at it from the standpoint of the minimal part of this overall project that needed the variance compared to the amount of fence that they're putting in. See, it's close to 400 feet. The other thing is the whole issue of design and scale and proportion and monotony.
And I'm not saying that I disagree with that, and I kind of figured that's what you were going to say. And this is where I have a problem, and not so much with the staff, but some of the rationale as to why some things are done differently than others. I just don't, I think we put ourselves in a very bad situation when we become irrational in some of the things that we do. And I'm going back a couple of cases that we just had today, that I feel that the inconsistencies that occur creates problems for everybody, not only just here in this room, but in the neighborhoods and in this community as well. And believe me, I have no problem with your fence. The gates, I think there's a question, but with your fencing, I have no problem with that. You know, I think if the regulations say you can have a fence within the guidelines of the requirements and the regulations, and who am I to say you can't? But I think somewhere along the line, we have to get more consistent in what we approve and what we do not approve relative to some of the things that we approve that seem to be unfair in this particular situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Hodge, real quick, please.
One very quick minor point. As you all know, as I just said, variances are supposed to be based on something unique about the property. Just want to point out in the staff report, it does say there does not appear to be any special circumstances unique to the subject property.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Bell, do you have a question?
No, but when you're ready for a motion, I'll
Okay. I believe all of us recognize that fence is not an issue. It's just a matter, I think it was just said, a matter of preference as far as the gates is concerned. So, any other questions from the board? No. If not, I'm ready for a motion.
I want to point out that I think that it has been properly noted that it is important for this board to be consistent and that not to be, in many cases, is very confusing. And it's basically because of that that I make the following motion. I move that V2007-92 in the Wilms and Associates Architects appeal for a variance to increase the allowable heights of gates and columns in the front yard from 6 feet to 7 feet 11 inches in a single-family residential zone on property located at 1620 Richmond Road be denied for the following findings. There are no special circumstances applicable to this property which are not applicable to any other property governed by the fencing height restrictions. 2, strict application of the zoning ordinance will not deprive the applicant of any reasonable use of his or her property where a 6-foot tall fence, gate, etc. has been already permitted. It can be constructed around the property. The requested variance is only to allow a particular style or decorative gating. 3, essentially, the circumstances are the result of the action of the applicant, where the applicant's stated reason for needing the variance is only to allegedly conform to architectural styling of the structure as a matter of preference.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. The motion was made for disapproval of the 2007-92. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded. If there's no further questions, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of disapproval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
I think we need to have a show of hands on this. So, once again, all those in favor of disapproval for the 2007-92, please raise your hand. Mr. Griggs, is that your hand up? Thank you. That's 3 for disapproval. All those opposed, please raise your hand. We've got 2. Mr. Stout? We've got a 3-2 vote for disapproval. Thank you, and thank you. I believe at this time that covers everything that was on the agenda. Does the board have any items that needs discussion? If not, does the staff have any items that needs to be brought up? No? In that case, our next meeting will be November 30th, and I'll declare this meeting adjourned.